All right. I am going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sylvia Hernandez. I'm the manager of Illinois recruitment for Michigan State University and also one of the co-chairs of the Professional Development Ad Hoc Committee. So again, welcome this afternoon to our Lunch and Learn series. I just have a quick little announcement and then I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. Welcome again to IACAC's Lunch and Learn series. You may recall a few months ago, we surveyed our membership asking for feedback about professional development opportunities. So many of the topics that have been covered and are still being covered in this series came from those survey results. Multiple members wanted to kind of connect with others informally, so we hope this gives you the space to do that. Just a few housekeeping details, and then I'll turn it over to our facilitators who will guide the conversation. We just want to ask that all participants be mindful that this is a professional space, and we ask you to keep conversations both focused on the questions under consideration and respectful of the experiences of other participants, especially as some of our topics may carry significant impact with colleagues. At the end of today's event, we will be sending out a short survey. I promise it's short, 4 questions about the experience. If you don't mind filling that out, we'd really appreciate it, especially since this is our first time hosting an event of this nature. And then finally, of course, if you're not an IACAC member yet or you need to renew your membership, we encourage you to visit iacac.org to learn more about the membership benefits. So enjoy your Lunch and Learn series. Thank you for your participation. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christy to get you guys started. So enjoy, have fun.
Hi, everyone. I am Chrissy Grotsky, and hold on, I'm going to admit some more people. Awesome. Okay, so I'm with Michigan Technological University, which is up in Houghton, Michigan. And I'm with the crew here, but I've been tapped to give us all the rules for today. So first of all, if you haven't already muted your phone, can you please, or your mic, can you please mute your mic? We're going to use the raise your hand function. So if you have something that you want to say, raise your hand or chat it in the chat box, and then we'll call on people to talk. So you do have the ability to unmute yourself, so you don't need us to unmute you, but this will make sure that we're not having a ton of people talking over everyone. Also use the chat function for smaller ideas or questions, comments that you have on what's being spoken about as well. That way we'll be able to get as much information out as we can while trying to keep the conversation flowing. We're keeping as much notes as we can in a Google Doc, which we're going to share with everyone after the meeting, so that at least we'll try and collect as much information from this, kind of a big brain dump as you might. So without further ado, I will turn it over and let my other presenters, or moderators, I think is probably a more appropriate word, introduce themselves.
Hi guys, I'm Caroline Heitzman. I am an Associate Director of Admissions at Alma College. I'm also the Athletics Liaison. This is my first time working at a private institution, but previously I was at a public institution and a community college. So learning how to navigate the world has been fun and implementing it in these new settings. So we're excited to get this conversation going. Our third moderator is on her way.
Yes.
So hopefully soon.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if she had popped in. So the joys of technology, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you get caught up. It's just life, right? Welcome to the world we live in these days. So the first topic that we kind of wanted to talk about were virtual high school visits and how you're planning on navigating them this fall. For those of you that maybe tried them this spring, if you have any tips of what worked and what didn't work so far, what are you nervous about? What are some pitfalls that you have? So that's kind of where we're headed in the initial conversation. So let's start with people that maybe have done some already this fall or over the summer or this spring. Did anyone have any success? Anyone want to start off? I know that I did one with Oaklawn High School this spring that, although we didn't have any students, it was really great for me to meet with Kelly and kind of go over what was going to be happening with the applicants this fall. So it gave us a touch point and it went really smoothly. I think some of the things that went really well were giving us a space to chat for just a few minutes. And so even if you're not able to get students on board, I think it was a great way for her and I to connect, especially with all of the changes that were happening. Caroline, what have you had work for you or not work for you so far?
So first, just creating a big document to know within my territory who is doing virtual visits and what platform are they using. So not all of, I'm located in Michigan, but I have one county in Michigan, and then I have the entire state of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. So trying to figure out who's using what platform and how they're using it, because not everybody is on rep visits, unfortunately. So navigating that, and then reaching out to counselors ahead of time. So trying to give them maybe some examples that they could give to their students for questions to ask me, asking them what specific topics they would like me to cover with their students based on the class that I'm meeting with, or if it's just sign up only. So yeah, so far going well, getting them scheduled, but I haven't ran any yet for school visits. I've done individual visits all summer.
One of the things that has been really helpful, as well as I see a lot of districts coming together and doing like joint district ones where you'll be able to see students from multiple high schools at one particular time slot. I think that that probably is helping both on their side from a planning standpoint, but also from our side because we're getting more people all at once. I mean, Zoom fatigue is a real deal, right? So how can we cut that down, not only for ourselves, but also for our students and for the counselors and such. So that has been really helpful. What's everyone? Oh, yep, let's admit all of them. We do have a couple more people now.
Chrissy, can I talk about Zoom a little bit?
Sure.
What I found out with the district meetings that you're having where it's more than one high school, if you're just doing the Zoom meeting, they can still see everybody. They can still chat privately. So you lose a little bit of control with that. So our solution to that is if we have more than one high school, we're going to do it as a webinar instead of a team meeting because of also the anonymity there. And then you can control what you put into the chat if the students can chat. And then you can also have somebody moderate if you need.
Yes, I'll be right out. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Can everyone make sure that their mics are muted? Thanks, Jen. That is a really great idea. Not something I thought about either. Anyone else have any great tips like that they'd like to share? Is there anything that people are nervous about? I mean, besides the fact that Zoom didn't work yesterday at all, yesterday morning. Are there any things else that we're concerned about?
Hi guys, I'm Toni Chandler and I'm the Bradley, Texas rep. And one thing that we've been doing down here that seems to be really helpful is doing visits as university groups so that the school is just scheduling one time, but the students are getting to hear from 4 or 5 different schools at the same time.
That's a great idea. We also have some chat-in ones that have come in. One of the questions was, how are people collecting data from the students they meet with? I know there's a couple of different ways people are planning on doing that. I know at least in our office, we've talked about 2. So if we're doing just like a Zoom or like a Google Meet or something like that, we have a specific link that we're putting in the chat box and asking the students to fill out. And so that works well if it's a high school that's maybe virtual and the students are on individually. And so that has been the way that we're going to do that. And then that feeds right in and it gets put right in our system as a high school visit using that particular URL. Also for ones where we're setting those up through Slate, we've also kind of used that as the front end to be able to do that as well. If we're doing using Scheduler is another way that we're doing that. If it is a group where it's at the high school, that's where we're kind of hoping that the high school counselors are going to be able to help us if it's a big group collect some of that information, but we're not 100% sure how that will work if it's like one big room and they're live. So that's where we're challenged too. Does anyone have any good ideas for that? Oh my gosh, the turn off annotations for kids so kids don't draw in your presentations. So if anyone didn't see that in the chat box, but does anyone have any ideas for? Yep.
There's a couple of good things. This is Rachel Georgakis. I apologize, I'm late. I'm also a school counselor from Fenton High School, and I'm helping moderate as well today. Had some issues with my children that prevented me from joining on time. So thank you for your patience. But Chrissy, there's a good one in the chat also about putting a QR code on the PowerPoint slides too for participants, for high school students.
Does anyone else have any other comments that they'd like to? Oh, here, Jill, I see that you have raised your hand. Oh, are you lowering your hand or raising your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about what people are doing in regards to recording the presentation. I know last week during the Lunch and Learn, people kind of talked about, like, is that even allowed for privacy reasons? Like, are we allowed to record? And then my office was kind of saying, like, yeah, I don't really, like, almost like that they didn't even want to have them recorded. So, but then a district employee sent out an email to college representatives asking, like, an expectation was to record it and send it to them. And so, but my office is kind of like, no, I don't really think we want to do that. So a solution that we came up with was, in case anyone else is having this issue of their office is saying we don't want to record it, but the school is saying, like, please send the recording to us. We kind of came up with the solution to just have, like, a predetermined set high school visit recorded session that we send to any school that asks for a recording. So it's just like a basic high school visit recording, one that will go to any school that asks for it. So it kind of give the school something, but we avoid the kids being on record, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of what I just wanted to ask, if anyone was dealing with that or how they're doing it.
That makes total sense. Jill, to jump in, we kind of ran a test run of what our college visits would look like from the high school side during our college boot camp a few weeks ago. And we asked reps if we could record those sessions, and we did it through Google Meet. And the nice thing about doing it through Google Meet is when we recorded them, it was only the rep that was recorded. There's no student faces that get recorded with how those settings work. So if anyone is looking to do recorded sessions, there is option, at least functionality in Google Meet, where whether students have their screens on or not, it is only recording the rep and the presentation they are sharing.
Okay.
I can bring up something that kind of is along these lines. I'm Mary Alice Berg from Loyola University, Chicago. I'm teaching, like, a freshman seminar this semester on Zoom, and we met for the first time yesterday. And one thing I didn't realize for people using Zoom and making the decision to record is, if after your session is over, then a student comes and asks you an individual question, like, that's still recorded too. So, like, yesterday in my seminar class, like, a student pulled me aside at the end to, like, tell me about a personal situation that she was in. And when I went to send the recording to one of my students who's in Japan and, like, didn't want to join me in the middle of the night, I was like, oh my Lord, like, I'm glad I thought about this and looked through. So that might be something to consider, that, like, if students after the visit do want to talk to you one-on-one, it might be better for you to, like, pull them out of that public meeting and bring them into something more private where you're not recording.
That's a great thing. There's a couple other questions, but so I'm just going to kind of address a few of them, but then we should probably move on. We've got 4 topics, so we want to move on to the next one. So as far as times that reps are scheduling visits, I know personally I'm kind of all over the place with that, because schools, depending on if they're in session, if they're virtual, I think that this year is called flexibility, and we're just going to have to be unique with how we put our schedules together, which, to be honest, there's not as many late night college fairs. So as an admission rep, at least being able to do evening stuff isn't terribly different, where I know with the high school side, that might not be something that that's like an addition to you. So some of that, I don't know if it's just automating the process a little bit so that you're having to be involved less and can kind of turn it over and let the college really run with it. depending on the policies at your school. And then how are high school counselors? Rachel, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's definitely a lot right now, right? As a high school counselor, we have maybe our own virtual visits that we are promoting to students that are happening between reps and our high school, whether that's through rep visits or Explore, what other management system you're using. And then also the amazing opportunities that both ICAC is offering, that CAR is offering with different college visits for students and families and different affinity groups through that. So for us, how we're promoting that is we are definitely emailing it. It's going on our website. And then I also have a Google Classroom for my seniors. That's a virtual college and career center that there's a whole college visit section. So it talks about virtual visits on college websites through different groups like CAR and ICAC, and then also the ones that we will be having at Fenton. And I think one of the things that we've really worked on that relates to something someone else previously brought up in the chat just about when visits are is making sure that the visits that we're offering, the timeframes will work, whether our high school schedule is remote, hybrid, or in person. Because as a high school counselor, we want to be really mindful that we know that representatives have a Rubik's Cube to make your schedules work in terms of the high school visits. And we don't want to be, oh, now we're back in person, we can't make this time work. Oh, now we're remote, or now we're hybrid. And so I think if you're setting up your calendar, that's just something to be really mindful of when reps can visit.
So our next topic was virtual events. And so I'm going to post in the chat box some of the questions that we talked about, but pretty much what are you guys thinking as far as virtual events this fall, both from the college side and the high school side? Have you tried maybe doing online events so far? Are there pointers, things that you learned along the way that you'd like to share?
I'm planning right now an athletics open house because we have no athletics on campus this fall. So we're teaming up with our athletics. We're splitting it into 2 sessions, more of fall sports and then spring, winter sports in the afternoon. And working with them to each be able to invite 2 to 3 recruits. Well, the thing was 2 to 6, thinking not everybody's going to invite up to 6 because we're all trying to stay within our number cap, which is 100 for spaces. But also factoring in if there's 3 recruits and they're each bringing 2 parents, those numbers are adding up very quickly. And then we have about 30 of our staff that are there working the event. So right away ran into pitfalls with numbers and availability and then also sanitization. So working with our facilities to get groups on campus, it's really about them having a spot to sit. And then we are rotating the presenters. That's a big thing because then if they leave, nobody can sit in that chair for another 10 minutes. So while it's being sanitized. So right away, just starting to think logistically, how does this even work? Also, one of the big components is always, giving our guests food for coming to visit, giving them a meal. But we are not doing any meals on campus for visitors. So then it's gosh, how can we really, make them feel like they're spending time with us? They're, enjoying this day. So it's coming along with the planning, but it's just a lot to think of at once. And hopefully we'll have a good turnout still.
Scott, you want to add in here?
Yeah, just in terms of virtual events, one thing that we're doing at Oklahoma is we're just making sure that we're partnering up for every virtual event that we're doing. So I'm the Chicago-based admissions staff member, and I have some other states in the Great Lakes area. So I'm doing a preview presentation next week, now that I look at my calendar. California rep is partnering with me so she can manage the chat during my preview. And then when she does her West Coast preview, I am monitoring her chat. So we're just kind of partnering up to make sure that we have backup. So there's somebody presenting and doing all, I guess, the formalities of the presentation, and then another staff member handling those questions one-on-one in the chats as they come up.
And Mike, in the chat, you had a great idea about with virtual events, consolidation is important. I know when we did our preview day this fall, that was one of the biggest projects was putting together the drop page for our website, that everything was going to sort of live on, so that it was really easy for the students to navigate as they were going through the virtual open house that we did. And I feel like I've attended some things professionally that I wished had that drop page because there's so many individual Zoom links flying around that, you know, just a little bit of extra thought would have made it easier to navigate. So you're 100% correct. Is there anyone from the high school side that's doing anything virtually that you'd like to talk about?
I have a quick question. This is Lisa DeLuca from the American Academy of Art. We recently had a webinar meeting with our rep from Hobson's, which obviously is branched out into so many different areas like rep visits and intersect. But when we were speaking with our representative, she highly encouraged us to promote our virtual events on Hobson's. And I was just wondering if anyone has done that and if they had success with it.
Anyone? Seeing none. If anyone has had success, I would recommend that you connect with Lisa, because she probably wants some more information about how that went and what it looked like and all of that. Lisa, do you want to drop your email in the chat box, and then people can reach out with you if they have particular comments?
Sure. And you know what? I just do have one quick question too regarding rep visits. We have not scheduled our virtual rep visits yet this year. We're going to be doing that very soon. But I know in one of the webinars I was on previously, we were trying to figure out how we get a lead generated from a student through rep visits. And I think if I understand correctly, that a student has to register with their high school counselor to go to the actual meeting. But whether or not that information can be shared with a college rep seemed to be a little bit of a discrepancy. So our schools basically following the same idea where somehow we get a URL link to the student in our rep visit so that they have the option to fill out the card. I think what we're planning on doing is basically sharing our screen with the students and showing part of our presentation. And we have a slide with a QR as well. So of course that's very easy because the student can just hold their phone up. But in the event that the student does not have a phone in the rep visit, is anyone sending a URL link to the student? And if so, does that have to be monitored through the counselor on the high school end who set up the rep visit?
Rachel, I'm pass that one to you. Or if anyone else has any comments as well.
So we're not using Naviance or rep visits this year. We just moved away from it. So, but in the past, how it worked for us is that, yes, you're correct. Students would log or register for a college visit at the high school through their Naviance account. And that data would be kept within Naviance and the school's account. So that would be shared with colleges in a list, but it's not e-shared, has been my experience in the past. I don't know, and the reason I mentioned that we've moved away from it is I don't know if that's an update that Rep Visits and Naviance has done for this year because we're not using it. So it's possible. In talking to a few reps at the beginning of the year when we kind of did our college boot camp as a trial run for some things virtually, we talked about that QR code or dropping a Google form link or whatever other prospective student form that you use into the chat box for students to fill out. And that did work successfully with students completing that. My experience with students virtually right now is they will typically have their cameras off, even when they're meeting with me from the high school side, that comfortability of having that camera on, even with someone they're familiar with, isn't always there. And a lot of time, depending on what's going on in the background and other things at home, but that they've been really interactive through the chat function, and that instead of asking questions aloud, but they will definitely answer questions in the chat or fill out links that you put into the chat as well. And I know a few people mentioned that they're going to do PowerPoints. On the high school side, we've been using an interactive feature called Pear Deck, which is an app you can put onto Google Slides, and it allows students to answer questions within your presentation, and it will save for you as a Google Sheet so that then you can have all their information afterwards. So if anyone wants information about how to use that, I'm happy to share it. I'm going to just put my email in the chat because I think that could help with that, some of that information you're gathering. And then someone did just say in the chat that different campuses are requiring different registration processes about who's collecting student info ahead of time in rep visits, that even if students don't show up, the rep will have student contact info to follow up. So until, I think it's in this, Aaron Murphy says this really well, that until we see it live when it happens, it's kind of hard to know how that's going to work. So I don't know if anyone has any other insight about that.
We might all be in the hurry up and wait phase. We're all trying to problem solve, but I think that for most of us, we probably haven't really done
No,
much
it's totally
yet.
a learning as we go. I mean, I normally would have had my visits posted by now, and I'm still, I said, oh, I'll have it up in early August on the ICAC form, and it's not there yet because you're still working out procedures and who's monitoring them from our side, and all of those things to make sure that they're worthwhile for students and for our college reps too. So right there with you on not knowing how it's going to work yet.
Is there anything else that people would like to talk about virtual events, not specifically high school visits, but like if you're doing like virtual counseling sessions, planning virtual FAFSA nights, whatever that might be? Does anyone have anything that they've got questions about or want to talk about before we move on to the next topic? All right, seeing none. Okay, so the next question that we kind of want to pose are, oop, there is one. April, where is everyone finding fairs and school events since this is in a typical year? That is a great question. I know that I'm pretty much using rep visits, emails that I'm getting from the counselors. I've been using the ACAC website. So like I travel a couple of different states. So I've been going to there, or ACRO, depending on what, sometimes it's the ACRO. Is anyone else using anything else to sort of keep track? There's also that spreadsheet on the IACAC website as well that people are trying to keep up to date, that talks about what people's plans are. I can try and find it as we chat here too. Is there anyone else that's using anything else? All right. So here's the link that we have on the IACAC website, which that would probably be a really good place to at least start. So how frequently are schools offering virtual events? With North Park, I'm guessing from the college side. I don't know, that's like the big balance right now, I think, for all of us, because you feel like whatever you're doing, you know that every school is then multiplying, and these poor kids already, a lot of them are sitting on Zoom all day. So I know that we're trying to be really mindful, not only about how many events we do, but also making sure that we're keeping them really short. You know, typically had we done like a virtual chat about financial aid, for example, in the past, it maybe would have been a half-hour presentation plus questions and answers. Like this year, we're trying to break things into smaller bites and have more smaller events. So we'll talk specifically about FAFSA, we'll talk specifically about scholarships, and trying to keep the information to about 10 or 15 minutes plus questions. So I would say for us, probably the frequency is going to be more, but little itty bitty bites along the way. And then also we're trying to partner with other colleges as much as we can as well, so that students can get more bang for their buck as far as opportunities to speak with us. How about everyone else?
Yeah, we're doing one a month. It's called our Explore Alma, so you can come learn more about us, and it's just one per month. And then we're also doing just different events that we do throughout the year. So we do like Highland Arts Day, just one in September, one fall open house that's more geared towards transfers. And then for our scholarship type of events, we're not even doing those in the fall. We're actually pushing it to January and February, along with some other just specific styles of events that students like to attend. So we do like a STEM day, a math day, performing arts ensemble day. We're just waiting till the spring for some of those events, but usually just one explore event per month, which we've always maintained that.
The other thing that I would suggest is that whenever you do one of these little virtual events is to try and post it to your YouTube page if you have access to it. I think that a lot of students, they're trying to find some of this information on their own time as well. So that is something that can be a good landing zone. Whether you create like an admissions portal on your school's admission page, whether you have something else that's independent for your particular admission office. But I feel like if there's a collection of not only these, but just some more candid stuff as well, send your tour guides out with some iPhones and let them have fun. Because I think if they're on campus, I guess that's part of it too. But some of it I feel like is getting some of that experience, because there's going to be limited visits on campuses across the nation. So trying to get the spirit of your school is going to be important this year. It's not just about information. It's also about the spirit of things. So all right, I think we're going to move on to the next topic. Thank you. It's one of the concerns, and I think this is a concern for everyone, is how do we strive for equity in our virtual recruitment counseling practices? I mean, especially with so much going virtual and there just being a disconnect from even ability to have Wi-Fi and computers and time and access to things. What as high school counselors are you doing to make sure that you're still reaching out to those students that aren't physically in the building, maybe that you can't shake by the shoulders and be like, hey, come into my office? Or what are you as college counselors planning on doing to try and make sure that you're connecting with students that maybe you would have only seen in a high school visit because they're working late or have other access issues?
I can say something. I think it's important to remember that the phone is still a thing and not everyone wants to do Zoom or video, especially with like some parents that I've been working with. Like, I think at the beginning of this, we started to think like we got this tunnel vision of like, well, I have to answer everything over email or I have to do a Zoom. And it's like, oh, no. Sometimes it's easier just to say like, this would be so much easier to talk out over the phone. And then the other thing I would say is, a lot of us now in this new world have more availability to meet with students one-on-one. So whereas before someone might have needed to travel to your campus in Boston to meet with a counselor one-on-one, like kind of promoting that idea that like either over the phone or offering multiple platforms. Like I've had students that have said like, hey, can I FaceTime with you? Like I have an iPhone, sure. We can definitely do that. So kind of like meeting students where they are in terms of the technology that they feel comfortable with. But remembering that like the phone is still a thing, especially when Rachel brought up that these students don't always want us to like talk with faces with them. So if they're gonna have video off anyway, like they can do it on their phone instead of their computer.
And sometimes just to talk about the facing, what we found at our school is it's not always comfortability with being on video. A lot of times it's about the level of internet access a student or family has. So their internet will be, we're finding that with students that their internet is more consistent if their video is often off, that it takes a lot more bandwidth to be on. And when they're home learning on a device, as siblings are home learning on devices and parents are home working on devices, that internet bandwidth has been really stretched. And so a lot of times that when I'm meeting with a student, because our district has mandated that we use Google Meets for security reasons, that it is just like their letter pulsating as they talk to me of their first initial. But that's okay. And what's been really interesting to me, and I was worried about this, right? Because so much of our profession is really based on both sides of the desk, that interpersonal relationship and those connections. And that even if I'm not seeing a face, that those connections and relationships have still been able to be formed in a pretty natural way. And so I'm pretty optimistic about that, but I think, yeah, don't assume that students aren't engaged if their video is off. And I appreciate you guys, assuming positive intent, because a lot of times it does have to do with access for a lot of students.
I know Sean mentioned about shooting quick messages on his work cell, and April was talking about individual options, one-on-one times as well. That seems to be a consistent thing. And I will second that. I found this spring, especially with sort of the scramble that was happening, especially with my applicants, that texting became more important than ever. Because it was a way for us to just check in with each other, as well as it was a way to just be able to answer a few questions on the fly, where they didn't feel like they had to set an appointment with me. They didn't feel like they had to sit and listen to another event. They could just ask a quick question. And once you establish that relationship, they seem to use that as their lifeline to Michigan Tech for sure.
Jen had a really good question in the chat. Jenn Gross from University of Denver from the high school side, just speaking about where students are in their process right now and wanting to meet them where they're at with their top 3 concerns. And Jen, yeah, my students, the top concern for them has been about testing, 100% about what schools' test policies are, and that's been from parents too, 100%. So I think this will vary high school to high school based on how much programming students got as juniors. I know for our students, our junior night was the week after that we went to remote learning for the rest of the year. So students and families didn't get that in a normal way. Not every junior got a junior meeting like they typically would have gotten. So I would just, our students are behind of where they would normally be. And our students, often I work in a school that is primarily first generation college students. And so sometimes they're already feeling behind in the process, whether they are or they aren't, that's just a feeling that they bring with them. So feeling behind in the process is a large concern, and feeling, do I have time to catch up? Even my students who aren't behind at all, who have submitted things, they have this sense of anxiety that is a lot larger than it has been in the past. Tests, for sure, we have been urging them that when schools say they're test optional, that they mean that they're test optional, that's not a code word for like, no, but really drive 3 states away to somewhere unsafe that's still allowing tests, that's real. And so I have been redirecting students and parents who don't believe me to that, to representatives and college folks who are willing to have that conversation and verify my information, because often students believe it when you say it way more than when I say it. I could have said something 10 times. Chrissy or Caroline walks in the room and says it, or Jen, you walk into the room and say it, and they're like, oh, did you know? And I just smile and say, oh yeah, isn't that great? And pretend that I didn't say it 10 times already. So those are definitely just the amount of anxiety about feeling behind, test scores. And then a huge question I've gotten that students are really concerned about, should I write about COVID in my essay or not? That has been a big question. They're like, this has been my major life experience, but I don't want to sound the same as everyone else. And so that's been something we've been working through student by student and letting them know that, there is a separate section on a lot of applications and on the Common App to talk about if that affected you differently. So maybe that's not the only defining experience that you're sharing through your essay, but certainly allowing for individual choice there too.
And Tara, I'm going to call you out, but like her and I, we both just went through this crazy training over the last week. And one of the big topics that we talked about, the two of us and the rest of our staff, was how do we talk about fear as admission counselors? Because like this year, more than ever, I feel like we've had to talk about it all spring with the students that were scared about returning to campus, scared they weren't going to return to campus, scared what that was going to look like if they did, what they were going to miss out if they went virtual. And I feel like this coming year with so many unknowns, we need to be addressing that. So it's kind of I mean, people will argue about Mavs logs, needs, triangle, but it is true. Like, I feel like these students really need to feel comfortable where they are before they're going to know where they're going. And so part of us, I think as a whole, both the college and the high school side, is talking through some of these fears so that they're able to make a good decision, because until their needs are met, they're not going to really be able to make any decision at all. And so I think it's important for us on both sides to be asking students, how are you feeling? What's going on? Because from parents losing jobs to stress of technology issues and all the decisions that are having to be made with so many unknowns, I think that it's really, really, really important that we keep addressing it. Not that that's the only thing we talk about, but just do that check-in, that little litmus test, stick your pH strip in, see how it goes, where they're at before you just jump off and now come to Michigan Tech, okay? So there may be some more steps and some more things going on that we need to talk about before then. So, yeah.
I so appreciate you doing that, because so many of my students are afraid to maybe bring up those fears to the college side. They may feel like they're being judged if they bring up something that they feel like would reflect poorly, even though no one on the college side is seeing that as a negative reflection. That's something that they have assumed. So they may not come to you with those concerns necessarily. Parents will feel more comfortable, but students, and primarily I think a lot of first generation families, may not know that it's okay to ask those kind of questions or fears. And so if you ask that directly, that'll really, I think, help with this issue of equity while we're remote.
You're muted, Kristen.
I'm muted. I love when that happens. Okay. Kristen, you had a great question. Should we be waiting to do traditional high school visits later in the fall because students are trying to figure out remote high school? Will they hear us better later? And I feel like for every student, it's different. I feel like there's groups of students that I'm meeting with right now, so maybe the one-on-one is better right now, that are so excited and they want 100 things because they didn't get to do anything all spring, and now they're full steam ahead and they're excited about college. But I think you're right. I think that some students aren't in the right headspace. And to be honest, I haven't scheduled much in the way of high school visits yet, and part of that was for that reason. How is everyone else feeling about it?
So I've been meeting with a lot of high school athletes that are trying to get recruited because their season got cut short. And so before it started in Michigan, a lot of them were taking their visits this summer. So it was back to back to back meetings. And I've noticed that the coaches are really trying to push the timeline too, because nobody's playing. And so, well, shoot, we got to get this recruitment going. And the students are there for it too. They're like, yeah, I didn't play, so I want to get recruited. I want to get committed somewhere before I lose my chance. So I'm definitely seeing an uptick because I'm the athletics liaison. I talk to a lot of those coaches, and it's definitely a bit early on right now compared to the previous year. But my other process is you guys haven't even applied yet. We need you to apply. We need you to get accepted. I know your financial aid package is going to be a very big concern. So let's do that first. But there's just this pressure and this push to, I have to get recruited. I have to get committed before I lose my chance. So I'm not trying to pump the brakes, but I'm definitely trying to be realistic. And yes, I know your season didn't go as planned, but there's a lot that you can still figure out besides just committing to this athletic team. Let's actually, a lot of our athletes, when they visit campus, they don't meet with the professor because they just want to make it an athletic visit and only meet with admissions and only meet with football or basketball. So now I'm okay, we're going to work in a professor visit. Or if you're not going to do it on campus, I think you should still have a phone call with a professor or do a virtual meeting with a professor. So that's definitely a trend I'm seeing.
Kristen, I think that's a great point. For our school, and I know every high school is doing this differently, we intentionally, and our calendar will go live later this week for Fenton, but we intentionally are not having any virtual college rep visits until after Labor Day. This is just such a huge change for our students of getting used to this new remote schedule that's different than what our expectations were in the spring, and we decided that we needed to let them be in that space and feel caught up to speed before we introduced another layer. So for sure, but every high school is going to be handling that differently. And then the other thing I think that's just great is to, when you meet with students, to know that fear and that their space, that to back it up a little bit for what you might have been talking about a little bit more with juniors, to still talk about that process, but to remember that, yes, they're seniors, but they might be a little bit further back in their process because of the pandemic. But I'm curious to hear what other high schools are doing in terms of timing and what their students are ready for.
All right. Maybe we just don't know. Or maybe everybody's eating their lunch. That could be too. So the last topic that moving on that we want to talk about is just kind of the catch-all. So it's, what do you wish as a school counselor that the admission counselors knew about your virtual space, or vice versa? Like, how can we work better together? How can we understand each other? And if you're recruiting or counseling in a hybrid environment, like, how are you balancing that, being in school and out of school, maybe doing things in evenings? How is the work-life balance, as well as making sure that you're connecting with your students, working out? Anyone like to jump us off here?
You're asking both high school and counseling side?
Yep.
All right, I'll jump off. Don't just because I'm jumping, don't follow me.
And don't go off the deep end.
Right. I think for me, at this point in time last year, I'd have things scheduled, honestly. I'm a little anxious. I was more anxious last week because I've got some high school visits scheduled. I had my first one last week. But I have more of those panels for StriveScan and other things going on. But on top of that, they still want us to maintain visiting as a regional 100 schools in the fall. And they want us to take weekly information sessions. And now on top of that, we're supposed to put in 4 to 6 hours a week doing one-on-one visits as well with this Calendly program. And I'm anxious and I'm nervous and I'm overstressed about it. I know it'll work out, but it seems like because of Zoom, things get piled on deeper and deeper and deeper. And then the last question was, so do you think you could read 800 to 1,000 applications in the month of November? And I said, no. I said 600 is much more manageable, and that's where I'm going to cut it off. But, you know, I'm sure other people are feeling this way, but my main concern is when I'm visiting with the kids, I want to meet them where they're at. I know this is so different. I want to have, like Rachel said, that conversation up front where you just kind of gauge where they are and let them know they're not alone. I think that is so important in what we're doing with this class in particular. They have dealt with a lot, and they have dealt with a lot of stress, and the more we can de-stress it for them, I think the better. But also, we need to de-stress ourselves. We need to have that balance. And so I'm just encouraging everyone. I'm not intending on doing visits on Fridays unless absolutely necessary. So make sure that we're taking time for ourselves is really key. So I hope I didn't jump off the deep end, but that's my feelings and where I'm at right now.
And I'm so glad you shared that, because I think that's where a lot of us are. I know for me, and I saw, you know, Sean said that he's feeling the same way in the chat. So does Alexandra and Stacy, and I do too. I know for me, I feel like it takes me 5 times as long to do anything in this virtual environment, and to do it half as well as I used to do it in person. And then on top of that, I've got, like, you know, my kids Zoom bombing every meeting behind me and feeling not professional with students and families and with all of you. And so I so appreciate everybody's grace. I mean, I was late to this today for that exact reason, right? was working from home while providing childcare. And I know a lot of us are going through that. And so I just so appreciate everyone's grace. And I think that's kind of been my word for this year, is to have grace for my students, to have grace with all of the adults I work with, and also to have grace for myself, which has been maybe the hardest part.
Fabi, I love the fact that your mom Zoom bombs your meetings. My first professional staff meeting that I ever was on with Ripon College, I had just moved into living with my grandmother, and for some reason they accidentally called the house number and not my work line. And so my grandmother, in true grandmother fashion, stood at the bottom of the stairs and went, "Christine, it's for you." To which I answered the phone and everybody on the line started laughing. So we all had those moments. I had it before Zoom, now they get the visual, but had I still been living with my grandmother, she would have been right there with you. But that's awesome. Where else is everybody at, like with just life in general?
I really miss life on the road. Like, I never thought I was gonna miss travel because, you know, you're gone for usually I'm gone for 3 to 4 nights. And obviously, like, I miss my boyfriend and my dog and just my bed. But now I think I'll have a nice appreciation for travel. I miss my morning coffee from Starbucks on the company car. I miss my Panera lunch. And I just miss just doing work outside of my own home and connecting with students that are further away, and telling them about this great place that's a few hours away that, you know, they get to create their new life at. So it's made me appreciate my job more. Definitely still feel the stress of everything being added on, but it truly makes me miss being a recruiter at the core. So.
Has anyone walked through
with my boss, we said we have to remember that, like, even eventually when things go back to normal, like, there's still a lot of things that we might keep from, like, the Zoom virtual world. So I think, like, that having her say that has allowed me to, like, look at a lot of things that we're doing in the lens of, like, is this just a reaction to COVID, or, like, is this actually something that's good that we should be doing all the time? Like, we've run some student panels where, like, prospective students can just, like, ask our current students questions, and, like, they've been amazing. And, you know, I've been watching our students answer them and so proud of them. And kids after have sent me messages to say, like, that was really helpful that it wasn't over moderated. Like, you know, we got to ask, like, what we actually care about, not what you think we care about. So I would kind of challenge everyone. I'm, like, a pretty positive person in general, to, like, also recognize that some of these things, like, are going to help us for the long haul. And so we want to make sure we're identifying strategies and, like, skills for ourselves to, you know, be able to continue some of this after, because everything's not going to go back to, like, real normal is what I'm kind of realizing at this point.
So I'm with you, Mary Alice. I am looking forward to seeing how we can use these things, because I have a lot of schools that I can't get to because a portion of my territory is my home state of Alabama. So I'm not going down there for work. I'm going to see my family. That's it. So it's like finding ways that I can continue all of these practices to connect with my students down there and try to get some more of those students to come this way. So, like, that has been really reassuring in this entire process, is just really seeing what practices and what tactics we can use and keep throughout the next year or so. It's going to be fun.
This is our time to be bold, though. Like, this is our time to try new things and to think outside the box. I mean, we're all guilty of kind of falling into the routine of things, right? I mean, I've done this since 2003. I don't know, do the math. Is that 17 years? So I'm probably just as guilty of I know what works in theory, but maybe this is the time to try something new. So I think that this year I'm really trying to push myself to think outside the box. Anyone else want to comment? Angie?
I know one thing that was really challenging when we first transitioned to this virtual recruiting life has been that I'm a personable person. Like, part of the reason why I love being a recruiter is agreeing with pretty much everyone who went before me. We're recruiters because we engage with people, and I love the fact that there's really no monotony about what I do. It's like travel, and when I get tired of travel, we're reviewing applications, and when I get tired of that, we're back on the road again. And literally every single day on the road, I'm meeting someone new, and that's part of the reason why I love my job so much. And with presenting and interacting with people, there's this rapport that you develop with people just in physically engaging with them. That sounded so weird. It was coming out. But, just that in-person interaction that you have with them. And so one of the things that I really had to charge myself to do, because right after we went into lockdown, we had a lot of major events. And I'm saying we because my colleague, Mary Alice Berg, is on this call. And so we, like, within 2 weeks, wasn't it, Mary Alice, that we had to do Loyola weekend? And then
it was wild. It was like, how did we live through that?
Insane. Like, I applaud them tremendously for what they were able to do. But right after that, I also coordinated a regional event virtually. And also I'm a professional development person. So we had a couple of events that we had to do virtually. And I realized I'm not so engaged on screen. Like, I kind of fell back on my laurels, and I was like, hey, I'm good at this. I'm a good presenter, and just gotten used to that. And I'm like, wait, there's a whole new dynamic that I need to really challenge myself with and try to convey my message via the screen that I don't have available to me like I would when I'm there in person. Like, you can walk around, you can walk up to people and really kind of, not at a college fair, but like in a presentation that you just don't have in a virtual environment. And so I really had to go back to the drawing board and say, how am I going to be able to engage this group in a way that, is only available to me virtually, that I normally would probably find pretty easy to do if I was there in person.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else have we have about 2 minutes, so any last questions or concerns about virtual spaces? Or I wish I could give everybody a hug. I am with you, Fabi. Yes, I'm a hugger. Just is what it is. I'm kind of nervous my pants won't fit. I'm not gonna lie. All right. On that note, thank you. Do we make the same impact virtually that we do in person? That is true. Mm-hmm. Do our personalities really come through?
I think they do. I think, I've been meeting with a lot of students one-on-one and in groups earlier in the summer, and they are, I think, in groups, they're almost, in larger groups, I think it's been harder. I think in those smaller groups or those individual meetings virtually, that's where we can see that impact. But in that larger groups, just like when we're in this large group of almost 100 people, we're a lot quieter, right? Than if we were in a group of 15 to 20. And that's what I think you'll see with students too. But yeah, I absolutely think, Jen, that you guys are gonna make that same impact virtually. And who knows, you might reach some kids, I think, that you may not have before, to what Mary Alice was saying, that we might do things sometimes a bit better and bring those practices with us moving forward.
Well, thanks everyone for joining.
Well, and hopefully we can have more discussions like this in the future. I know there's going to be more sessions coming up here, I think mostly Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I hope that everyone at least has some sort of takeaway, even if the takeaway is literally just that we're all in this together. Alexandria, do you want to say something quick before we?
Oh, sure. Hi. I just wanted to mention the rule of three. It came up on a call about sort of safety and best practices with virtual events on another call like this that I was on recently. And I just thought it was a really good tip that, that I forgot to mention earlier. And it has to do with making sure that we're all safe and that we're making students feel safe in this virtual environment. And so a few schools that have done this have talked about it as the rule of three, where it's you as the counselor on the admission side, for example, from the college, and then the student. And then the third person would either be their school counselor, if they're available, or a parent or family member on the call. So it's not just you and the student by yourselves. So that's just something to think about as we are all navigating this. I think just, so I appreciate the chance to mention that.
Thanks for sharing. That's good to think about.
Chrissy,
and I muted myself. I thought I was unmuting myself. Welcome to the world we live in today. Okay, so I'll just be the talking head. But thanks everyone for sharing, and hopefully we'll be able to, we're gonna try and go back through the recording and compile all the information that we have today and get it out to you guys. So thank you so much for sharing, and have a good one.
Thanks everyone.